The sun had just begun its slow crawl over the endless rows of golden wheat fields that stretched like a sea of amber across the rolling plains of central Kansas, casting long shadows and filling the air with the dry, dusty scent of summer's end. It was late August of 1999, and the harvest was just weeks away, time when every farmer in Jefferson County was glued to the rhythm of the land, the hum of the combines, and the creak of the old John Deere tractors that rumbled through the dirt like tired old giants. At the edge of this quiet, sun-drenched patch of earth lay the Hillcrest Farm, a place that had been in the Miller family for generations but had been abandoned nearly 20 years ago after the mysterious disappearance of the family patriarch, Amos Miller, and his wife, Clara. To the local folks, the Millers' vanishing was the kind of story whispered about over coffee at Mabel's Diner, the kind that had all the pieces of a small-town tragedy but no answers, no bones, no confession, nothing but a fading memory and a half-crumbled barn that stood like a tombstone on the horizon. Amos had been a fixture of the community, rough-handed, kind-eyed, a man who loved his cattle and his wife more than anything else. But one day, in the heat of an August afternoon in 1980, Amos and Clara had simply vanished without a trace, leaving behind the scent of hay and the worn leather reins hanging on the fence post, like ghosts frozen in time. No one really wanted to talk about what might have happened. Some said a bad deal gone wrong, others whispered about a feud with the neighboring landowner, a certain man named Russell Crane, whose sprawling cattle ranch bordered the Millers' fields. But mostly, it was a wound that time refused to heal, a mystery that everyone hoped would just stay buried along with the years. That is, until now. The sound of scraping metal and a low rumble echoed across the farmstead as a backhoe clawed its way through the dry earth beneath the crumbling remains of the old hayloft, sent by the county to clear the land for an agricultural development project that had stirred whispers of both hope and anger in equal measure. The project promised to bring new irrigation systems and modern machinery to the region, but for someone like Zeke Turner, a retired farmhand who'd once worked the fields with Amos himself, it felt like an invasion, a tearing away of the very soul of the land. Zeke was a man in his late 60s, with a weather-beaten face carved by decades of sun and wind, hands thick and calloused from years of repairing fences, milking cows by hand, and coaxing life from stubborn soil. He still wore his battered Stetson hat low over his eyes and carried with him a slow, deliberate way of speaking that seemed to echo the steady heartbeat of the farm itself. When the driver of the backhoe uncovered something unnatural beneath the earth, a dark shape poking through the dirt and tangled roots, Zeke's heart tightened with a mix of dread and a sudden flicker of hope. It was a weathered, cracked bone, bleached by time, buried just beneath the surface, close to the old irrigation canal that Amos had spent his last summer working to repair before he disappeared. Word spread fast through the town, reaching the ears of Sheriff Martha Bell, a no-nonsense woman in her early 50s, herself the daughter of a dairy farmer and raised on the county's tough but honest soil. Martha had always admired Amos Miller. She remembered him as a kind man with a ready smile, and she never forgot the day the Millers vanished, a loss that left a hole in the community she had sworn to protect. The discovery of bones on the Hillcrest farm stirred something deep in her, a call to finally lift the veil on the decades-old mystery that had haunted the county. Martha arrived at the scene that afternoon, her worn boots sinking slightly into the soft earth, the familiar tang of alfalfa in the air mixing with the metallic scent of freshly dug dirt. Beside her stood Dr. Samuel Reed, the county's forensic anthropologist, a man whose gentle demeanor and sharp intellect had earned him the trust of rural folk despite his city-bred roots. Together, they examined the bones, a skull with cracked molars and a femur broken in what looked like a decades-old injury. Dr. Reed's frown deepened as he gently brushed away the dirt, murmuring, "These belong to someone who's been here a long time. Could be our missing Millers." Meanwhile, Zeke lingered at the edge of the excavation, memories flooding his mind like a river breaking through a dam. He recalled those long summer days when Amos would drive his Massey Ferguson tractor over the fields, his voice booming as he shouted instructions to Zeke, who'd be fixing a fence post or hauling feed. He remembered Clara's laughter drifting through the warm evening air during county fairs, her hand always steady as she showed her prize-winning dairy cows. The pain of their absence hit him hard, but he pushed it aside, focusing on the task ahead, finding the truth. But not everyone welcomed the renewed attention. Across town, in the wood-paneled office of Crane Ranch, Russell Crane sat behind a polished oak desk, steepling his fingers as he watched the news coverage of the bone discovery flicker on the small television. Crane was a man in his late 60s, broad-shouldered and sharp-eyed, a figure both respected and feared in Jefferson County. His family had controlled cattle and land for decades, and rumors whispered that Crane's ambition stretched far beyond the ranch's fences, threatening to swallow up smaller farms like Hillcrest. Crane's voice was calm, measured, but there was a cold edge beneath his words when he spoke to his hired hand. "This muck's gonna stir the hornet's nest," he said. "We don't want no digging into old ghosts. Make sure that site's secure. No unauthorized visitors." Elsewhere, at Mabel's diner, the usual morning crowd sat in their faded booths, talking in low tones about the sudden reopening of the case. Among them was Clara's brother, Frank Langston, a retired agronomist with silver-streaked hair and keen eyes that missed little. He'd always suspected there was more to the Millers' disappearance than just a simple vanishing. "I told folks years ago there was foul play," he said to a skeptical neighbor. "I just didn't have the proof. But I know the soil out there, something ain't right." Amos was onto something. The discovery sparked a fire within Zeke, who decided to take matters into his own hands. He couldn't shake the feeling that the bones were just the beginning, that the land held secrets buried deeper than the dirt itself. His first stop was the old Miller farmhouse, its sagging porch and peeling paint a testament to the passage of time and neglect. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the faint, sweet smell of dried tobacco, Amos's favorite pipe tobacco. Zeke ran his hand over a worn leather-bound journal resting on the cracked kitchen table, one he found tucked away in a drawer while clearing out old clutter. The journal belonged to Amos. Its pages were yellowed and brittle, filled with detailed notes about the farm, the crops. The dawn brought little comfort to Zeke Turner as he climbed down from the rickety porch of the Miller farmhouse, the old journal tucked beneath his arm like a lifeline to a past that refused to stay buried. The wheat field stretched out before him, the pale green shoots trembling in the morning breeze, but the peaceful facade belied the storm gathering beneath the surface. The days since the discovery of the bones had been a whirlwind of whispered rumors, heated town meetings, and cold stares from neighbors who'd once nodded at him with quiet respect. Sheriff Martha Bell had tasked her deputies with canvassing the area, interviewing anyone who might have known Amos or Clara Miller, or might have noticed something strange in those final days before their disappearance. But the answers were scarce, the memories faint, and many simply shook their heads, unwilling to dredge up old wounds. Yet, Zeke knew better than to give up. Something in Amos's journal had gnawed at him, a puzzle piece that didn't fit quite right. The cryptic warning about the West Field and the mysterious visitor felt like a key, so that morning, he set out toward the far edge of the property where the irrigation canal curled like a lazy serpent beneath a stand of cottonwoods. The soil there was darker, damp and fertile, but Zeke noticed something odd, a patch of earth that looked recently disturbed, the grass still struggling to regrow over an uneven mound. Kneeling down, he scraped away the topsoil with his hands, revealing fragments of rusted metal, a broken blade from an old farming tool, possibly part of a sickle or pruning shear, along with a piece of tattered cloth, faded to a sickly yellow. His heart pounded. This was no coincidence. Just then, his phone rang, Sheriff Bell's voice crisp but edged with urgency. "Zeke, we need to talk. Meet me at the station as soon as you can." He wiped his hands on his jeans and started the dusty walk back toward town, his mind racing with questions. At the sheriff's office, the walls smelled faintly of coffee and old linoleum, a stark contrast to the open fields he preferred. Martha greeted him with a grave nod and ushered him into her cramped office. On the desk lay a thick manila folder, marked with yellow crime scene tape. "We've had some new developments," she said, pulling out photographs that made Zeke's stomach turn. They were aerial shots taken last week by a private pilot hired by a local journalist, pictures of the Miller Farm's West Field, showing strange, irregular patches of withered crops that stood out like scars against the otherwise thriving wheat. The area roughly matched the spot where Zeke had found the disturbed soil and rusty tools. Dr. Reed had analyzed soil samples from those patches and found high levels of toxic pesticides banned years ago, substances that could devastate crops and poison livestock. "We're looking at sabotage," Martha said, her eyes locked on Zeke's. "But it's old, could be connected to the night Amos and Clara disappeared. Someone was trying to destroy their farm, make sure they didn't succeed." The news chilled Zeke, confirming his fears that Amos's enemies hadn't just been rivals, they were ruthless enough to kill. The sheriff handed him a note recovered from the Miller farmhouse, a yellowed, brittle piece of paper folded neatly with handwriting Amos's own, a warning addressed to him from an anonymous source: "Beware the Crane name. The land isn't what it seems." Zeke's mind flashed back to that hot summer night when he and Amos had stayed up late fixing the leaky irrigation pipe. Amos had spoken with a quiet anger about rumors that Crane Ranch was looking to buy up surrounding farms, crushing small owners under their weight. "He's no friend to the land," Amos had said, voice low but fierce. "If he gets what he wants, the whole county'll be one big feedlot, No place for folks who care about the earth. The memory stung sharper than Zeke expected, fueling his resolve to uncover the truth. But as they dug deeper, new shadows emerged. At the county co-op, Zeke and Martha met with Greg Harris, a wiry man with sharp eyes and a nervous manner, who once worked as a foreman for Crane Ranch and had since drifted into quieter jobs. Greg claimed ignorance about any wrongdoing but grew visibly uncomfortable when Zeke mentioned the sabotage. "I don't know nothin' about no poisonin'," he insisted, twisting his cap in his hands. "Crane's a hard man, but he's no killer." Yet, Zeke noticed the telltale signs of someone holding back, a glance over his shoulder, a hesitation in his voice. As they left, Martha whispered, "We'll keep an eye on him." That afternoon, Zeke stopped by Mabel's diner, where the scent of fresh coffee and frying bacon wrapped around him like a familiar blanket. The diner's old jukebox played soft country tunes from the 80s, a nostalgic reminder of simpler days. Sitting in a corner booth was Clara's brother, Frank Langston, flipping through a faded photo album. "You found the bones, huh?" Frank asked without looking up, voice rough but tinged with sadness. "I reckon that's just the start. There's things buried deeper than that, Zeke." Over eggs and toast, Frank recounted tales of the Millers' last years, Amos's growing unease, Clara's whispered fears about strange men visiting their farm, and a confrontation with Crane himself that ended with a veiled threat. "That land means more than crops and cattle," Frank said. "There's something in that dirt. Secrets someone wanted to keep hidden." Zeke's thoughts turned back to the journal entry about shadows near the silo. He remembered Amos mentioning a secret compartment beneath the old grain silo, a place where the Millers stored their prized seeds and records. Under the fading afternoon sun, Zeke made his way there, the familiar creak of the silo's wooden door echoing in the stillness. Inside, he knelt beside the metal bins, his fingers tracing the rough surface until they found a small latch concealed beneath a loose floorboard. With a grunt, he pried it open to reveal a cramped, dust-choked crawl space. His flashlight flickered as he crawled in, and at the far end, he found an oilskin pouch tied with a faded leather thong. Inside were papers, ledgers chronicling crop yields, sales, and curious entries of payments to unnamed parties. There were also scraps of letters between Amos and a local agronomist, references to illegal shipments and contaminated seeds. As Zeke read, a knot tightened in his stomach. Someone had been running a secret operation, and the Millers had discovered it, perhaps the motive for their disappearance. But before he could delve further, footsteps approached the silo's entrance. Heart pounding, Zeke hid the pouch and slipped into the shadows, watching as two men appeared in the doorway. One was tall, broad-shouldered, unmistakably Russell Crane himself, his face as hard as granite. The other was Greg Harris, looking nervous but obedient. "We can't have this coming out," Crane said in a low voice. "The land, the shipments, it's all tied to the new irrigation project. If word gets out, the county's done for. You know what's at stake." "But what about the Millers?" Greg asked. "They were going to talk." "That's why they're gone," Crane replied grimly. Zeke's blood ran cold. He'd stumbled onto something far bigger than a simple land feud, a conspiracy involving illegal agricultural schemes and a ruthless cover-up. After they left, Zeke crept from the silo and made his way back to the farmhouse under the darkening sky, mind spinning with the weight of what he'd heard. The late summer sun burned low over Jefferson County, casting long shadows that stretched across the Miller farm like dark fingers reaching out to clutch at the secrets buried beneath the soil, and Zeke Turner felt the weight of those secrets pressing down harder than ever before as he stepped out of his battered pickup and surveyed the scene of the latest sabotage, the irrigation pump shattered beyond repair, its twisted metal dripping with the rust-red dust of the earth, a silent message that those who sought the truth would be met with violence and intimidation. Sheriff Martha Bell stood beside him, her face a mask of grim determination, the lines etched by years of rural policing deepened by the strain of this reopened case that threatened to unravel the fragile peace of their quiet farming community. The two men stared across the ruined machinery to the vast fields beyond, where the wheat bent gently in the breeze but held the memory of a darkness that no sunlight could reach, a darkness tied not just to a family lost but to a web of corruption and power that stretched its roots deep into the fertile earth. As the county's forensic team worked to salvage what they could from the pump, Zeke's mind drifted back to the faded leather journal he'd discovered in the Miller farmhouse, its brittle pages whispering warnings and half-finished thoughts, a desperate plea frozen in time. Among the entries, a name kept recurring, Henry Dawes, a local agribusiness mogul whose influence spread across neighboring counties like the tendrils of an invasive weed, choking out competition and shaping the land to his will. Amos had written of meetings with Dawes, tense exchanges over disputed land boundaries and allegations of illegal pesticide use, accusations that were quickly swept under the rug by county officials who answered to Dawes's interests. Zeke knew confronting Dawes meant going toe-to-toe with a man who wielded power like a scythe, cutting down anyone who dared to challenge him. That afternoon, accompanied by Sheriff Bell, Zeke drove into the heart of Dawes's sprawling estate, a fortress of well-kept fields, gleaming machinery, and spotless silos that gleamed in the harsh light like tombstones for the honest farmers crushed beneath his ambitions. Inside the grand office, Henry Dawes exuded the cold charm of a man accustomed to getting what he wanted. His tailored suit and expensive watch marked him as a world apart from the dusty boots and faded flannel shirts of the locals. Yet beneath the polished veneer lurked a ruthless edge, a glint in his eyes that spoke of long-held secrets and dangerous alliances. "Mr. Turner," Dawes began smoothly, "I've heard about your little excavation. Digging up the past is a fool's errand, especially when it threatens to unravel the progress we've made here." Zeke met his gaze steadily. "Progress built on lies and poison. The Millers deserve justice. You know more than you're letting on." Dawes smiled thinly. "I'm afraid you're chasing ghosts, old man. The past is dead, and best left that way." The meeting ended with veiled threats and warnings, but Zeke left Dawes's estate more determined than ever. On the ride home, Sheriff Bell shared her own suspicions, recounting how several local officials had received unmarked envelopes in recent weeks, silent warnings to drop the investigation. "It's bigger than Jefferson County," she said grimly. "This corruption spreads wide." Back at the farm, Zeke's search uncovered another clue, a hidden ledger sewn into the lining of Amos's worn coat, discovered by his granddaughter Sarah, a bright woman in her early 20s with a deep love for the family farm and a fierce loyalty to uncovering the truth. The ledger detailed clandestine payments and shipments, dates aligning suspiciously with the times Amos and Clara had gone missing, hinting at a smuggling ring operating through the county's agricultural infrastructure, using grain shipments and fertilizer trucks to mask illicit goods. The implications rocked Zeke. Could the Millers have stumbled onto a criminal enterprise operating right under their neighbors' noses? But before he could share the findings widely, another blow struck. Late one evening, as Zeke sat by the farmhouse window going over the journal and ledger, a loud crash shattered the quiet. The barn door had been smashed open. Rushing outside, he found the place in disarray, feed sacks slashed open, equipment vandalized, but most chilling was the overturned workbench where his notes and Sarah's documents lay scattered and soaked with rain from the broken window. Someone was sending a message: stop digging or suffer worse. The community's whispers grew louder, with some questioning Zeke's motives and others quietly supporting him. A local preacher voiced concern during Sunday service, reminding the congregation that truth was a heavy burden and that sometimes peace came from silence. Yet, in stolen moments beneath the night sky, Zeke found solace in memories of Clara Miller, the warmth of her laugh, the strength in her hands as she coaxed calves in the dawn light, and Amos's unwavering commitment to the land. These reflections steeled his resolve. The next breakthrough came unexpectedly when Frank Langston, Clara's brother, approached Zeke with a battered box of photographs and letters uncovered in the attic of his own home. Among the faded images were snapshots of late-night meetings between Amos and a shadowy figure, Greg Harris, whose nervous demeanor had already raised suspicions. Letters hinted at blackmail, coercion, and threats exchanged behind closed doors. Frank believed Greg had been forced into complicity, a pawn caught between the Millers and the powerful interests of Dawes and Crane. A confrontation with Greg Harris was arranged under the watchful eyes of Sheriff Bell, but the interview yielded little more than denials and carefully crafted alibis, leading Zeke to suspect he was being deliberately misled. Yet, something in Greg's eyes betrayed guilt, not of murder, but of silence and fear. It was a red herring, a smokescreen thrown up to divert attention from the real puppet masters. As autumn's chill crept into the air and the wheat harvest came to an end, Zeke found himself alone one night walking the fields, the scent of freshly cut grain mingling with the sharp tang of impending frost. Under the clear, star-studded sky, he paused by the old irrigation canal, eyes fixed on the patch of disturbed earth that had started it all. His thoughts drifted to a conversation with Clara years ago, when they'd sat watching fireflies dance in the twilight. "This land's alive," she had said softly, "and it remembers everything. If you listen, it'll tell you its secrets." Those words echoed now as Zeke knelt in the dirt, feeling the earth beneath his fingers. Somewhere, buried beneath the soil, lay the key to the mystery, evidence that could break the silence and bring justice to the Millers. But the land was also a trap, a silent witness to deeds that many wanted to stay hidden. That very night, a desperate figure slipped into the shadows near the Miller farm, a figure who held the final piece of the puzzle but feared the consequences of revealing it. The next morning, Zeke received an anonymous note slipped under his door, written in trembling handwriting: "Meet me by the old windmill at midnight. I have what you need. Come alone." The message was a lifeline and a warning all at once. As the hours dragged by, Zeke prepared himself for the meeting. The first frost had settled over Jefferson County, dusting the wheat fields with a delicate silver sheen and turning the once golden landscape into a patchwork quilt of browns and grays that stretched beneath a pale, cold sun. Yet within the walls of the Miller farmhouse and the sheriff's office, a fire burned hotter than ever as Zeke Turner and Sheriff Martha Bell faced mounting pressure from every side while piecing together a conspiracy that threatened not only the truth about Amos and Clara Miller's disappearance but the very future of the community they loved. The evidence gathered from Maggie's testimony and the smuggled documents painted a damning picture of corruption at the highest levels, revealing a sinister plan orchestrated by Henry Dawes and Russell Crane to covertly distribute contaminated seeds laced with banned pesticides across countless farms, including the Millers, to sabotage smaller operations, force desperate owners to sell their land at a fraction of its worth, and consolidate control over the county's agricultural output under a single ruthless monopoly. But proving this conspiracy required more than papers and hearsay. It demanded a smoking gun, something concrete enough to withstand the scrutiny of courts and the venom of powerful adversaries who wielded influence like a weapon, and the path to that truth lay buried in the labyrinth of the land itself. Zeke had spent long hours wandering the Miller farm with Sarah, Amos's granddaughter, whose sharp eyes and quiet determination matched her grandfather's spirit, searching for clues where few dared to look. And one chilly morning in early November, their patience was rewarded when Sarah noticed something peculiar about the irrigation canal near the west field. The water flow was irregular, as if deliberately obstructed, causing patches of the field to wither and die, mirroring the sickly crop patterns seen in the aerial photographs. And upon closer inspection, they discovered a concealed valve hidden beneath a rusted metal cover, rigged to divert the water supply intermittently, a sabotage tactic designed to weaken the crops while keeping the cause hidden from casual observation. And Zeke felt the pieces of the puzzle begin to click together, a brutal method used to cripple the Millers' livelihood and push them to the brink. The discovery energized their resolve, but it also drew the ire of their enemies. Shortly after, an anonymous tip led Martha and her deputies to a remote barn on Crane Ranch, where they uncovered crates of banned pesticides and evidence of falsified shipping records linking the supplies directly to Dawes' company, a breakthrough that triggered a crackdown by state agricultural inspectors and federal agents. But the response from Crane was swift and brutal: public denials, hired lawyers threatening lawsuits, and a campaign to discredit Zeke and Martha as meddling outsiders with a vendetta. And the divide in the community deepened, with some fearful of the consequences of exposing long-hidden truths, while others rallied behind the cause, haunted by memories of the Millers and the creeping loss of their way of life. Amidst the chaos, Zeke found unexpected support in Tommy Harris, Greg's younger brother, a rough-around-the-edges mechanic who had long harbored doubts about the family's complicity. Tommy's knowledge of the county's back roads, equipment, and underground dealings proved invaluable as he helped track shipments and pinpoint secret drop sites where illegal chemicals were stored or moved under cover of darkness, risking his own safety to feed information to Zeke and Martha, a quiet act of rebellion against the corrupt legacy that had ensnared his family. Meanwhile, emotional moments surfaced as Sarah confronted the fading photographs and letters left by her grandparents. Reading aloud passages from Amos's journal to Zeke during late-night vigils by the fire, their voices soft in the cold farmhouse kitchen, recalling harvest festivals, county fairs, and the quiet dignity of a life rooted in the land's rhythms, moments that fueled their courage in the face of mounting threats. But the stakes escalated dangerously when Maggie, the whistleblower who had come forward with the critical evidence, was found unconscious in a ditch near the edge of town, her body bruised and battered, a grim warning that silence was demanded at any cost. And the county reeled in shock as the darkness that had shrouded the Millers' fate seeped back into the present with a vengeance. Determined to protect Maggie and break the cycle of fear, Zeke and Martha coordinated with state police to set up surveillance and secure the farmhouse as a safe house. But the tension was palpable, the threat looming like a storm cloud ready to burst. As winter deepened, the community prepared for the annual harvest dance, a tradition steeped in decades of rural camaraderie and simple joy. Yet beneath the festive music and laughter, the unresolved mystery hung like a shadow, a reminder of what had been lost and what still hung in the balance. And it was here that Zeke planned his next move, a risky attempt to draw out those responsible by leveraging the gathering's significance to the county. At the dance, held in the old grain barn festooned with faded ribbons and strings of bare bulbs, faces both familiar and wary filled the space. Farmers and their families dressed in their Sunday best, voices tinged with nostalgia and unspoken fears, and Zeke moved through the crowd with purpose, eyes sharp for signs of unease or defiance, while Sarah and Tommy kept watch at the entrances. As the night wore on, a whispered conversation in a shadowed corner caught Zeke's attention, a meeting between two men, voices low but tense, discussing the shipment and the plan to shut down the investigation, a confirmation of the far-reaching conspiracy. With Martha's backup, Zeke followed the men outside to a waiting truck, a tense standoff unfolding under the winter moonlight that ended with the capture of a mid-level operative carrying incriminating documents and a cell phone loaded with recorded calls implicating Dawes and Crane. The breakthrough sent shockwaves through Jefferson County and beyond, forcing state officials to launch a full-scale investigation into the illegal activities that had poisoned the land and silenced the Millers. And while justice had begun its slow march forward, the true cost was still unfolding. The community grappled with the betrayal and the scars left by years of greed and corruption, but Zeke found solace in the knowledge that Amos and Clara's story would finally be told, their legacy restored. As the winter wind swept through the empty fields and the first snowflakes drifted down like whispered promises, Zeke stood by the frozen irrigation canal, thinking of the land that had borne witness to both cruelty and courage, and he vowed to see the fight through to the end. No matter what shadows still lingered beneath the snow. Winter's chill had settled deep into Jefferson County, blanketing the fields in snow that softened the harsh edges of the land but did little to ease the tension gripping the community as Zeke Turner, with Sheriff Martha Bell and the ever-faithful Sarah Miller by his side, prepared for the next stage of their battle against the powerful forces that had conspired to bury the truth about Amos and Clara Miller's disappearance years ago. The recent arrests and exposure of illegal pesticide smuggling had cracked open the facade of control held by Henry Dawes and Russell Crane, but beneath the surface, the fight had only just begun, and Zeke sensed that the darkest secrets still lay hidden in the shadows of the county's long, cold winter nights. With the help of Tommy Harris's knowledge of the backroads and underground channels, they uncovered a network of hidden storage barns scattered across the outskirts of the county, silent warehouses holding not only banned chemicals but also evidence that could finally connect Dawes and Crane to the Millers' fate, including forged land deeds, falsified inspection reports, and coded shipment logs. One bitter morning, after a long stakeout, Zeke and Martha, accompanied by a small task force, raided one such barn concealed behind a thicket of frosted oaks and found crates marked with official seals, inside which were not only toxic substances but also personal effects belonging to the Millers, a monogrammed saddle blanket, Clara's faded FFA jacket, and a leather-bound diary that had somehow escaped initial discovery. These artifacts struck a chord deep within Zeke, reminding him of the humanity buried beneath the cold facts and bringing back vivid memories of evenings spent by the fire at the Miller homestead, listening to Amos's quiet stories of the land's challenges and joys. As the diary's pages were carefully examined, they revealed a new layer of the mystery, entries describing secret meetings between the Millers and a small group of local farmers who opposed Dawes's aggressive expansion, farmers who had begun to organize a resistance, trading information and pooling resources to expose the corruption strangling the county's agricultural heart. But the diary also hinted at betrayal from within, a trusted confidant who vanished just before the Millers' disappearance and whose silence had paved the way for the conspiracy to flourish. The hunt for this missing link intensified as Zeke and his allies sifted through decades of county records, personal letters, and testimonies, uncovering names and faces long forgotten but critical to unraveling the tangled web of lies. And it was during one such search that Sarah discovered a faded photograph tucked inside the diary, an image of Amos standing alongside a man she recognized as Deputy Carl Jennings, the same lawman who had quietly retired shortly after the Millers vanished, his retirement marked by an unusual hush and whispers of off-the-record dealings. Confronting Jennings was risky, but Zeke knew he had to try. After tracking the former deputy to a modest home on the outskirts of a neighboring town, Zeke and Martha arranged a tense meeting in Jennings's cramped living room, the walls lined with hunting trophies and faded newspaper clippings. Jennings, a man hardened by years of policing but softened by age and regret, was initially defensive, denying involvement, but under the steady pressure of pointed questions and the weight of evidence, cracks began to show. He admitted to knowing about the Millers' resistance group but claimed he was powerless against the forces aligned with Dawes and Crane, forced to look the other way or risk losing everything. Yet his hesitation and flickering glances suggested a deeper complicity, and Zeke suspected Jennings knew more than he let on. Meanwhile, tensions in Jefferson County reached a boiling point as Dawes and Crane's supporters staged protests and intimidation tactics aimed at silencing anyone supporting the investigation, and the local press faced mounting pressure to tone down their coverage, leading to a standoff that fractured the tight-knit rural community. Amid this turmoil, Zeke received an anonymous tip directing him to an abandoned grain silo deep in the county's northern fields, a place where, according to the message, crucial evidence lay hidden. Accompanied by Sarah and Tommy, Zeke ventured into the decaying structure on a bitterly cold afternoon, the wooden beams creaking ominously above as they searched through dust and debris, until Tommy's flashlight caught the glint of metal beneath a loose floorboard. There, concealed in a rusted tin box, were documents, photographs, and a voice recorder with recorded conversations detailing the smuggling operations, threats against the Millers, and a chilling plan to cover their tracks by any means necessary, including violence. But as they examined the evidence, an unexpected noise echoed from outside. The crunch of footsteps in the snow, and a figure appeared at the silo's entrance, face shadowed and voice sharp as a gunshot. "I wouldn't be messing around here if I were you." It was Greg Harris, torn between fear and defiance, his presence a stark reminder that the past's ghosts were alive and dangerous. A heated confrontation ensued, during which Greg revealed a secret he had kept locked away. Years ago, he had been coerced into sabotaging the Millers' irrigation system and had witnessed the final confrontation between Amos, Clara, and the men hired by Dawes and Crane to force them off the land. Greg's confession added new urgency and clarity to the case but also placed him and those working with Zeke in grave danger. As winter deepened, Zeke found brief moments of reflection, often standing outside the farmhouse, watching snowflakes settle on the skeletal branches of the cottonwoods, recalling quiet afternoons with Amos and Clara, Amos's weather-beaten hands guiding the plow, Clara's laughter mingling with the chirping of crickets at twilight. And these memories reminded him of the resilience embedded in the land and its people, yet danger loomed ever closer. One night, as Zeke returned from a meeting with Martha, a shadowy figure emerged from the darkness, and a heated scuffle broke out, ending with the attacker fleeing into the woods, leaving behind a threatening note scrawled on a scrap of paper: "Stop now or lose more than your pride." The warning was clear, but Zeke's resolve only grew stronger, fueled by the voices of the missing and the dreams of a community that refused to be silenced. With the county rallying behind him, though fractured and wary, and with new allies at his side, Zeke prepared for the final push to bring justice and truth to the surface, knowing that the ultimate revelation, and reckoning, was fast approaching. The icy breath of a late winter night wrapped Jefferson County in a cold silence that felt heavier than the snow-laden fields, and as Zeke Turner stood beneath the skeletal remains of the old grain silo, the place where so many secrets had finally converged, he felt the weight of years pressing down like the frost on the earth, knowing that what was about to unfold would not only expose the darkness that had stolen Amos and Clara Miller from the land they loved but also determine the future of a community caught between hope and despair. The evidence gathered, the diaries, the forged documents, the recorded conversations, and the confessions, had painted a damning portrait of greed, betrayal, and cruelty orchestrated by Henry Dawes and Russell Crane, men whose ambition had turned fertile fields into battlegrounds and neighbors into enemies. But the final piece, the truth buried beneath the soil, awaited discovery in the depths of the abandoned silo, a place whispered about in hushed tones and avoided by all but the desperate. Accompanied by Sheriff Martha Bell, Sarah Miller, Tommy Harris, and a small team of trusted deputies, Zeke prepared for the delicate task of unearthing the hidden compartment he believed contained the answers to years of unanswered questions. The air sharp and biting as the wind rattled the hollow metal walls and the distant howl of coyotes echoed like mournful ghosts, as they pried open the trapdoor beneath the grain bins, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. Memories flooded Zeke's mind, the laughter of a county fair long past, the crackling firelight of evenings spent talking with Amos about the land's resilience, Clara's determined spirit as she tended to their cattle, all fueling his resolve to confront whatever lay below, to give voice to the silence that had haunted the county for 2 decades. The descent was slow and careful, flashlights piercing the gloom to reveal crates stacked against the walls, rusted farm equipment discarded in haste, and finally, a series of leather-bound journals, bundles of letters, and sealed envelopes marked with official stamps, all untouched by time. As they sifted through the trove, the grim story unfolded, a plan hatched to replace the Millers' prized seed stock with contaminated varieties that would decimate their crops, orchestrated to force them off the land so Dawes and Crane could expand their monopoly. And when Amos and Clara resisted, they paid the ultimate price. More horrifying still was evidence of a cover-up involving local officials, including the retired Deputy Carl Jennings, who had turned a blind eye or actively suppressed investigations in exchange for personal gain. The journals also contained the Millers' final pleas for justice, hidden away with the hope that someday someone would find them and reveal the truth. As Zeke read aloud passages filled with courage and heartbreak, a surge of emotion overcame him, a mixture of grief for the lives lost and determination to see justice served. But the revelation was not without consequence. Just as the team prepared to ascend, voices echoed from above. Henchmen loyal to Dawes and Crane had tracked them to the silo, intent on destroying the evidence and silencing the truth once and for all. What followed was a tense and harrowing confrontation beneath the moonlit sky, a clash of wills amid the cold steel and shadows of the silo, where Zeke and his allies faced threats, gunfire, and near betrayal, but their unity and courage prevailed. The sheriff's deputies, backed by state agents tipped off earlier, arrived just in time to detain the attackers, securing the site and protecting the fragile hope nestled within the dusty journals. In the aftermath, the county breathed a collective sigh of relief as Dawes, Crane, and their cohorts faced indictments on charges ranging from environmental crimes to conspiracy and murder, and the veil of silence that had cloaked Jefferson County for so long began to lift. Yet, for Zeke, the victory was bittersweet, marked by memories of Amos and Clara whose voices would never be silenced but whose lives had been stolen in the pursuit of power. The community came together for a memorial service in the town's old church, the pews filled with farmers, neighbors, and friends, many bearing ribbons and badges from the county fair, honoring the miller's legacy of resilience and integrity. And as Sarah placed a worn saddle blanket over the altar, she spoke with quiet strength about hope, justice, and the enduring spirit of the land. Standing outside afterward, Zeke looked out over the snow-covered fields, now peaceful but forever changed, knowing that while the scars of the past would remain, so too would the courage of those who refused to let darkness win. And as the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, casting a golden glow on the frost-kissed earth, he felt a measure of peace. Justice had been found, the truth had been heard, and the land would heal in time, tended by those who remembered, honored, and fought for its future.